All right, let's talk about something you've almost definitely heard of. FIRE. F-I-R-E. It stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early, and it's this huge movement that's all about one thing, getting your time back. But, what's the real story? How does it actually work? And maybe the biggest question of all, does it work? Seriously, just take a second and think about that. I'm not talking about retiring at 65 or even 55. What if you could just walk away from the 9-to-5 grind in your 40s? Or, get this, even in your 30s. Sounds like a fantasy, right? Well, that's the central promise of the whole FIRE movement. So the core idea is actually pretty straightforward. You save a ton of your income, and when I say a ton, I mean like 50, 60, even 70%. Then you invest that money pretty aggressively. The whole point is to build up this big pot of money, your nest egg, so big that the returns it generates can cover all your living expenses. Forever. Basically, you've bought your own freedom.
Okay, so how in the world is that even possible? Well, it all boils down to some surprisingly simple and honestly really powerful math. And it shows you just how fast your working years can just melt away.
Look, the real secret sauce to FIRE isn't some crazy investment trick or a get-rich-quick scheme. It's just one thing, your savings rate. Seriously, that one number is everything. So for a minute, let's forget all the complicated formulas and just lock in on this one core idea. All right, let's start with what's considered pretty normal, a 10% savings rate. It's what most financial advisors would tell you to aim for. But check this out. At that rate, you have to work for 9 years just to save up enough money to cover 1 year of not working. 9 to 1. That's a long road. Okay, but what happens if we pump those numbers up? Let's say you hit a 25% savings rate. All of a sudden, you're only working for 3 years to pay for 1 year of freedom. See how that timeline starts to accelerate? Big difference. And here we go. This is kind of the magic number for a lot of people in the FIRE community, 50%. Think about this. For every single year you work, you're saving enough for 1 full year off, 1 for 1. This is the moment where retiring early stops feeling like some far-off dream and starts looking like an actual, achievable plan. Now, just for fun, let's push it to the extreme, a 75% savings rate. At that point, you're saving up for a whole year of retirement in just 4 months. This is it. This is how people actually manage to retire in their 30s. It's radical, for sure, but you just can't argue with the math. So you're saving all this money, but what's the finish line? What's the number you're aiming for? Well, for most people, the goal is to have a portfolio that's worth 25 times their annual expenses. This whole idea is built on the famous 4% rule. It basically says you can withdraw 4% of your total investments each year and, in theory, never run out of money. That's the golden ticket. That's the key that unlocks the whole thing.
But here's the thing, right? Not everyone wants the same kind of retirement. So the FIRE movement has kind of branched out. It's created these different flavors for different goals. It's definitely not a one-size-fits-all kind of deal.
And this chart lays it out perfectly. You've got LeanFIRE, that's for the true minimalists who want to retire really early on a super tight budget. On the flip side, you have FatFIRE. These are the folks who want a more comfortable retirement, so they need a much bigger pile of cash. Then there's BaristaFIRE, which is this cool hybrid. You quit your high-stress career but maybe work part-time at a coffee shop or something for benefits and some spending money. And finally, CoastFIRE. This is where you save like crazy when you're young, get a good amount saved up, and then just stop. You let compound interest do all the heavy lifting for the next couple of decades. All right, so this all sounds amazing. Almost too amazing. And any plan that's built on one simple rule of thumb probably deserves a bit of a reality check. So let's ask the tough question. Is the very foundation of the FIRE movement, that 4% rule, really as solid as everyone thinks it is? And here's the catch. This comes from some big research out of Vanguard. It turns out the 4% rule, it was originally designed and tested for a traditional 30-year retirement. It was never, ever meant for someone trying to retire at 35 or 40. And that right there is the multi-million-dollar question, isn't it? If your retirement is going to be 40 or even 50 years long, way longer than the 30 years the rule was built for, what does that do to your odds of not running out of money? This chart makes the risk painfully clear. Look at this. For a 30-year retirement, the 4% rule has a pretty good success rate, about 82%. Not perfect, but solid. But stretch that out to 40 years, your chances drop to just over 50%. And a 50-year retirement, your success rate plummets to 36%. That's basically a coin flip on whether or not you'll outlive your money. Yikes!
And it gets worse. The original rule also made some, let's say, very optimistic assumptions. For one, it kind of ignores investment fees. It also pretty much assumes that the incredible stock market returns we saw in the 20th century are just going to keep happening forever. And it was based only on US stocks, ignoring any global diversification. So each one of these is another little crack in the foundation.
So, what's the answer then? Well, a lot of experts, including Vanguard, are pointing to something called dynamic spending. It's a more flexible idea. Instead of just taking out the same fixed amount every single year no matter what, you adjust. So when the market has a fantastic year, maybe you take out a little more. But when the market is down, you tighten your belt and take out a little less. That simple bit of flexibility makes a huge difference in making sure your money lasts for a really, really long retirement.
You know what? Let's say you nail all the math. You get everything perfect. The FIRE movement has taught us another huge lesson, and it might be the most important one. It turns out the biggest hurdles in early retirement often have nothing to do with your bank account. What a lot of the early pioneers of this movement found was, well, they hit their financial number, they quit their jobs, and then they found themselves bored, a little lonely. They didn't know who they were without their career. See, they had a perfect plan to retire from something, but they had no plan for what they were retiring to.
And this isn't just a feeling. The numbers really back this up. One study found that more than half of retirees were genuinely concerned about finding a sense of purpose once they stopped working. And it makes sense, right? Your job gives you a schedule, you see people, you get that feeling of accomplishment. A big bank account just can't give you those things. And all of this really shows that the FIRE movement is growing up. The whole conversation is shifting. It's becoming less about just pinching every single penny and more about, building a meaningful life. It's about designing a life you actually want to run towards, not just when you're trying to run away from. People are realizing that financial independence is an amazing tool, but it's not the actual goal. Which, I think, leaves us with the biggest question of all. The FIRE movement has absolutely proven that financial freedom is way more possible than most of us probably thought. But it also forces us to look in the mirror and ask, what would we actually do with all that freedom? Is the real goal just to escape the 9-to-5? Or is it to build a life that's genuinely full of purpose and passion? And that's a question that no spreadsheet can ever answer for you.